Have you ever been called a band geek, a theater nerd, cyber dork, studio rat, gamer punk, orchestra dork, book monkey, drama jock, Poindexter, artsy fartsy, or just plain weird? Well then, welcome to Art Nerds. This is the podcast where we sit down with our nerdy friends, embrace our inner geek, and celebrate our art. And welcome back, everybody. This is Art Nerds. This is the podcast where we talk to our nerdy friends about their art. Today, I have with me, via the internet, a new friend. This is Riley Ann. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for putting up with our technical glitches and hanging around to talk with me this morning. I met Riley through another friend who you've heard on the podcast, Carmen Leszewski, and our paths have crossed in an odd way, which we'll get to later, I'm sure. Anyway, Riley Ann, what is your art?
Well, most people know me as a musician. Back in the Midwest, I had an all-female folk band called the Matriarchs. And since then, I've moved out to Colorado, and currently I have a blues rock band called the Catcalls. And I also just started up a new all-female folk band called Back to the Mountain. But I do lots of art. I also have been published as a writer, both creative writing and journalism.
Really?
And I also enjoy painting, as you can see from my paintings behind me. So I really like to do all kinds of creative things. And we were just talking before the show about a little bit of theater I was in college, but I've kind of dabbled in theater since I was a kid. So kind of everything and anything at this point.
What would you consider your primary art then?
I would say music for sure.
Okay. You seem to be gravitated toward the performing arts. I mean, do you enjoy performing?
Oh, I love performing. I think it's such a great way to connect with people and to really, be yourself and, express so many different types of things when you're up on a stage. But, I also really enjoy being a writer and other types of things.
So suddenly I'm thinking that some of these arts are very public and very collaborative. Some of these arts, at least the way you just talk about them, are very private and introverted, so not social kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. Like when I'm doing a painting, when I really kind of get in that flow state or in the zone, it's like the world around me closes. And that's a really cool feeling. It's also a little scary because all of a sudden it's like you wake up from this like dream and you're like, how many hours have passed?
What day is it?
Yeah, so that's super fun. But it's actually really cool. During COVID, one of my friends made this challenge called Make More Everything. And it was like this artistic game of telephone where you submitted a prompt and the first person in line of all these different teams wrote a story about the prompt. And then just the story, regardless of who wrote it, was just anonymously given to a musician. That's the order it was. And then they wrote a song about it or some kind of composition. And then just the composition, the recording of that was given to a visual artist. And what was cool about that is, I said, yeah, I'm a musician, but I'll do any of the three. And to fill in some gaps and to help out, I ended up doing all three different stages of different teams.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, so I wrote a story for one of the groups. I think I wrote 2 songs because one of the musicians backed out, and then I did 1 painting. But they were all on 4 different teams. And so it was really cool to have a hand in a lot of different things. And so even though the act of painting is very solitary for me, that was a really cool way, and even writing for that matter, aside from workshopping with friends, but that was a really cool experience for me to sort of integrate a very individualized artistic practice in this concept of a team of, sort of passing the baton of this thematic idea as it evolves.
So each project, each team is it a different theme? Or did you just rely solely on what was handed to you and just gut reaction went with it?
Yes, both. So it started with the seed of a theme that the short story writer or creative writer, some people did poems, some people did short stories, I think, however they interpreted that theme. And then whoever is next in line just got the piece that was created in front of them. So the musician just got the story. They don't know what the original theme was. So that's how it's like an
Oh,
artistic game of telephone, is you don't necessarily know what the original theme was, but you try to convey it in your own interpretation. Whether it's, if you're a visual artist, some people did photography, some people did, paintings, whatever, is super open. So that was really cool.
that sounds. You're gonna have to maybe send me that as a challenge. Maybe if there's any guidelines written down, I'd love to read them.
Yeah.
But because I
So
think it just sounds like a challenge I would love to take on.
yeah, I don't know if it's happening this year. I haven't heard, because last year, so Maxwell Treader in Fort Collins, he put it all together, and everything from that particular challenge is still published online. So you can go and read the story and see the artwork, and also listen to the song that was created for that.
Okay.
So that's all online. And at that time, I had virtually no recording equipment, and I didn't even have an external microphone. So I literally recorded all of my music stuff using my earbuds with a built-in microphone, because the built-in microphone in my laptop was clipping. So I got a better sound from my wired earbuds. So that was a resourceful challenge for me. But yeah, that was super fun. And then last summer, he kind of reformatted it where instead of having it be a musical game of telephone, he put the visual artist, the musician, and sort of film directors and people involved in like creating films with editing and everything on a team together, and they collaboratively made a film based on a theme. So I was part of that last year, and I got to do the musical composition for a short film last summer.
That's exciting. That whole process sounds like just a great time.
Yeah, it was super cool because you start, both of them were great because they started so open-ended and just trying to figure out how are you going to interpret that work, whether it was something being handed to you the first year or last year of how you're going to build something together. So I was writing the score for a film that didn't exist yet. And I just said, okay, so just send me reference tracks and kind of what you're thinking. And I just kind of created music based around that. And that was super fun too.
Do you enjoy that process of just being inspired like that, or?
Totally. I think when you're given really strange parameters like that, and you have a very quickly approaching deadline, it really forces your brain to create things very quickly, as opposed to sitting around and waiting for the muse to strike you. So
Yeah.
I really hope that he continues to do challenges like that, because it's been so good for me to motivate this fire and be like, okay, how can I do this? What am I going to create for this? For a film that doesn't exist? Or how am I going to interpret this? Because for the first challenge, you just had a week to work with whatever was handed to you from the previous round. And so
Wow.
you just really had to work like under this really strict, pretty quick guidelines or deadline. And it makes you more prolific when there's kind of heat under your deadline.
Interesting. No, because I once in a while, the more boundaries I have, I used to. I come from theater, so I'm an actor, director, former puppeteer. So the boundaries are always there. It feels like, and when I say I want to do something creative, and I have no boundaries and I have no guidelines, I can't do anything. There's too much to think about. I don't know if
Yeah,
you feel the same way, but I appreciate having those strong boundaries. I get a lot of work that way done that way as
totally.
well. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting with theater because you always know when opening night is, but until a couple weeks before the show, and also, tech week is when suddenly things really come together. And there's always that moment where you're like, oh my God, is this going to blow up in my face? And I think it was I think it might have been in like Shakespeare in Love, that film where they're like, oh, everything comes together. And they're like, what if it doesn't? It's like, no, it always does. Like you could just trust that, in the theater gods. So it's just, with the deadline coming up, things just fall into place really fast.
Yeah. I love that movie because when they say things will come together, somebody always says, how? And then Jeffrey Rush says, I don't know. It's a mystery.
That's right. But it's sort of like that I feel like with art, I think people have these romanticized ideas of, oh, I'm just going to go sit in a cabin and be inspired. It's like kind of what I think you need is someone being like, I need this right now. You need to create something right now. And suddenly it's just like you get into that mindset. There was this great TED Talk that talked about creativity of, quantity over quality. Because if you're just striving for quality, your brain is constantly going to be in that editor mindset. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're trying to think of just more ideas, regardless if they're good, bad, or ugly, you're going to come up with even better ideas. And that's when I used to teach private music lessons and songwriting with people. That's what I tell them. I tell them, hey, quantity over quality. Just keep writing stuff.
I had never thought about that, but that makes sense. Because if I'm stuck, I'll come down to the shop and just build stuff, just experiment with stuff. Not that I'm doing anything, not that I have a goal in mind, but if my hands are busy, my brain is busy, sooner or later something falls out that's worthwhile.
Totally. And for me, when I'm writing a song, and there's like, I've had this before where there's that one line that you're like, oh, that's not really what I want. I don't know what I want there. Something that I'll do and that I'll teach my students to do is, okay, I want you to fill up an entire page with potential lines that could fill in that spot. Just come up with as many as you can, as quickly as you can. Come up with 20, 30, 40 lines. And in doing that, by freeing your mind up of just being like, okay, I need to come up with a bunch of ideas, you're going to find something that's like definitely better than what you had before. And there might be that one that's like, yes, that's the gold nugget I was missing. But at the very least, it's better.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just, I like your approach toward the problem, in that you just need the prompt. You just need, nothing motivates like a deadline.
That's true.
Even if that deadline's a minute away.
Yeah, for sure.
How did you get started in music and teaching music and, even in your painting?
Well, music has been interesting. Like many children, I was forced to take piano lessons as a kid, and I hated it so much. And apparently it's hilarious. My mom, I remember her telling me that for a while I had to take a break from piano lessons because all I wanted to do was just talk to my teacher and not have a lesson and just have this conversation with her. And I remember her kind of scolding me as a kid, like, she's here to teach you piano. You can't just talk to her. I'm like, what are you talking about? I had no idea. But looking back, I'm like, I could totally see that.
Yeah. My wife teaches piano to young kids. So yeah, I hear these stories too.
Yeah. And it wasn't like I was trying to sabotage the lesson. I just apparently really enjoyed my teacher and having a conversation with her. And like a lot of kids, I started playing in band. I took up saxophone in 5th grade and really got into band in high school. I had some amazing high school band teachers. And when I was a junior, my friends, we listened to a lot of like punk and ska. And
yay,
we started a ska band. So they asked me to play saxophone. So that was fun. I played some like basement shows and garages and stuff like that, just kind of for fun. And then in college, I kept playing saxophone and also violin. I took up violin in like middle school, and I just played in the ensembles. But I remember, do you remember Anna Troughton from UW-Platteville?
Vaguely, yes. The name is very familiar. It'll come to me.
Yeah, well, she's amazing. And I remember being in the music lounge and her having her violin and just playing something that I had like never heard before. And it was like my jaw dropped to the ground. I'm just like, whatever you're doing, I want you to teach me how to do that. And she was so humble. She's like, oh, no, it's nothing. And I was like, no, I want to know how to do that. What are you doing? And she's like, oh, it's like a fiddle tune. It's nothing. It's nothing. And just kept pushing it off. And I so desperately wanted to learn that. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't have a vocabulary for it. I didn't have a framework in my ears for it. And fast forward to when I was teaching high school English and I was living in Galena, the Blackberry Bushes string band came through town. And at that point I was hosting a Scrabble night, and during Scrabble night, the guy who owned the coffee shop, who became one of my really, really incredible mentors, would play the Blackberry Bushes CDs. And I had, again, no context for it, but it was a bluegrass band. And he told me, he's like, oh, the Blackberry Bushes are playing across the street at the Cornerstone on Thursday or whatever. And so I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go. And again, I saw Jacob Breitbach playing fiddle in this band, and I was just blown away. I'm like, I couldn't even understand what was happening because I'd always played classical violin. And so I got into old time. The Fever River String Band, based around Benton, Wisconsin, took me under their wing and taught me a bunch of old time fiddle tunes, let me sit in with them when they would have jams and stuff. And that's kind of how music took off. And it was funny when they would play out at Council Hill Station. And I was sitting in with them one day. Jamie Jones, the owner of Council Hill, came up to me. He's like, hey, I'm putting on this music festival. I want you to play. And I was like, I don't have a band. He's like, you don't need a band. You can just play. And I was like, no, I'll just start a band. And so that's how I started the Matriarchs. And I had the name idea for the Matriarchs. I came up with that when I was in Kat Tigerman's, one of her literature classes, Women in Mythology, when I was at UW-Platteville.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was like, the Matriarchs. I'm like, that's a really good band name. That's a really good name. I'm going to use that for something. And so that's kind of how the Matriarchs were born. And things kind of blew up. And for me, I got to the point where I was gigging 2 or 3, sometimes 4 times a weekend, and then teaching high school English 5 days a week, and then playing 2, 3, 4 more shows a weekend. And I just never had downtime. So I was like, yeah, I just want to do music full time. And that's what prompted me to move out to Colorado and take the big leap.
Wow. How long had you been teaching English?
I taught English for 6 years. I taught 1 year at Dubuque Senior High School, and I got laid off with the budget cuts. Mm-hmm. And then I taught 5 years at Scales Mound, which is right outside Galena.
Okay.
And then, I took the leap. I moved to Colorado, and I've been in all kinds of projects since then. I did like a 1-woman band with live looping, and I've played in different like folk and country bands as, kind of a hired gun. And, I started up the Catcalls, and most recently Back to the Mountains. So those are my 2 projects that I'm really in right now.
That's amazing. First of all, I applaud anybody who has the courage to jump away from the societal norm and go into art full time. And a big kudos to you for making it work. Number one, first of all, when we set this interview up, you sent me your website links, and I looked through most of your videos and your music, and the way you talk now. You don't have a style, do you? Or do you? I mean, you've mentioned ska, you've mentioned bluegrass, and your videos there's hints of old 60s and 70s hardcore rock. There's hints of 80s indie. There's hints, there's the 1970s singer-songwriter troubadour kind of stuff. What are your influences? And do you have a style or that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a style, but I feel like artists get pigeonholed into, this is the only style you do. And for me, it's like, yeah, I have a style, but I have multiple styles, and it's sort of like, if you think about how you act as a person, you're going to act a little bit differently as, someone when you're just with your best friend versus when you're out with a bunch of your friends,
Right.
at a bar or something versus who you are at work. And it's like, yeah, you're still you, but there's different sort of sides to your personality that different things come out in different ways. And I feel like for me, one of the really amazing things about music and instruments is that they can pull out these different sides of you as a person. And, I love what I do with the Catcalls and just totally rocking out and just letting everything go. But I also love doing like the sweet harmonies of a folk band. I also like doing kind of the more pensive, sort of darker singer-songwriter things that you were alluding to. And yeah, so I feel like I do have a style, but I don't feel a need to pigeonhole myself into just one style.
Yeah, and I wasn't alluding that you should, or but there's so. What are your influences? Who are your muses and your heroes? Because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of little streams flowing into this river.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like everybody has such a diverse set of music and artists that they've been exposed to over time. And I feel like no matter what or who you're watching, you can learn something from that. And for me, I remember being a kid and, my parents listened to like top 40 music, and then they got into like top 40 country when I was in elementary school and stuff like that. But my parents also had this tape of Meatloaf. And I remember loving and rocking out so hard to Love by the Dashboard Light of all things.
The Bat Out of Hell album. Yeah.
Yes.
Who doesn't have that in their collection somewhere?
And I just remember being like, I don't know what this is, but it's so cool. And, my parents also had like an 8-track of like ABBA, and just my brother and I like dancing to like Dancing Queen and stuff like that. And, despite some of those kind of like, at that time, they were anomalies for me because most of what we listened to was, again, current top 40 stuff. When I was in high school, my friends exposed me to a lot of new music. And that was in the era of, Napster and LimeWire and Kazaa, all that stuff. So yeah, it totally wasn't legal. We had no idea, but my friends made me all kinds of mix CDs of artists I never would have come across.
Yeah.
Because when I was growing up, we didn't really have internet at my house. We only had the Family 5, so I didn't get the exposure to like MTV or, stuff that a lot of kids had exposure to. And so I really credit my buddies in high school making me all these great mix CDs and getting exposed to, bands like Alkaline Trio. Where would I have been exposed to that when my parents are listening to Alan Jackson, and then even more so in college, it's kind of embarrassing. Like with just my lack of exposure, I didn't even know who Led Zeppelin was until I was in college, which is embarrassing, but I remember just being
embarrassing,
you don't really have a lot of control over it, but like,
yeah, I mean, I knew who they were, but to this day, I still haven't listened to a full song of Led Zeppelin. So you're not in bad company.
Yeah. But I just remember, constantly being exposed to new music thanks to my friends, because especially at that time, the internet was still, it's not what it is today.
Correct.
I remember when YouTube first came out when I was in college, and one of my friends was in the library. He's actually in some bands back in the Midwest too. I remember him showing me, he's like, look at this website. Anyone can post videos. And I'm just like, oh, okay. That's kind of weird, thinking it was like going to be another phase of a website. And that was YouTube. I had no idea. So yeah, I feel like I've just been constantly exposed, thanks to a lot of my friends, to a lot of music. And with how the internet has expanded, I've been able to really get into different artists and, find out who, Courtney Barnett is, and Nico Case and Serotones. And I remember, discovering Honey Honey. And it's one thing that's really cool about the internet now is you can find all these different artists that nobody else that you know has heard of them.
Hmm.
But tomorrow they could be huge. You just
Right.
never know.
Right. And I think that's one of the beauties of the digital age is that we can hear so much and be exposed to so much. And like you said, there's such a treasure trove out there. And yeah, I have my youngest daughter in her mid 20s. She has the Spotify account, and it's just, her playlist is huge, but but she collects some of the weirdest stuff. And it's insanely fun though. But it's fun because she's discovering the stuff I listened to as a kid. When I was a kid, it was, that's 70s through mid 80s. The stuff I listened to. But she's listening to stuff like Lou Rawls, thinking it's one of the greatest things she's ever heard. It's new to her. And I think that's one of the fun things about like what you're saying, the internet. There's so much to allow yourself to be influenced by.
Totally, and for me, it's like I constantly get inspired by people I see, whether they're big names or not, whether I see them live or I find some video of them online, or, sometimes local artists. Like one of my favorite local artists here in Colorado is a band called Pink Fuzz. And I have been following them. I first caught them at a show in, I think it was 2015. And, they're starting to really blow up. And I saw them at, a local theater show during one of our local festivals called Foco MX a few weeks ago. And I hadn't seen them in a few years with COVID and everything. I was just blown away by what they were doing. And they're kind of like a psych rock band, and that's a little bit different than what I do, obviously. But I just think that they're absolutely incredible. They're one of my all-time favorite bands. And they just live down the road from me in Denver, Colorado. So
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's impossible to be like, this is my roster of influences. But, there was a time when I lived in Galena when I first started getting into like old time and mainly old time, but some bluegrass too, where there was a period of a year where I almost exclusively listened to old time music, which is a pretty niche genre.
What do you mean by old time?
So old time is sort of the country music that precedes bluegrass. So it's like what people would play at like a legit barn dance, and people do square dancing too. With the advent of the radio, people were like, okay, we need to make these songs shorter, because the whole nature of a barn dance is you might play the same short, A, B part song for 10 minutes. And it's just the same two parts repeated over and over and over again. Like, okay, we need to make this be shorter so they're more radio friendly, and we need to mix them up. And this is at the time of like influence of urbanization and, soloing and stuff in bluegrass. And so that's how bluegrass got on the radio. Some Carter family songs got on the radio too, but so old time is like a very specific, like string band oriented genre.
Okay. Yeah. That was a new term to me in terms of music.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's kind of niche.
Excuse me.
But there was a period of time where for about a year, I listened to almost nothing but pure old time. And the vast majority were like all female bands. Like a band like Uncle Earl was a huge influence on me for old time. The Flat Mountain Girls, there's a whole bunch of people. The Blackberry Bushes aren't all female, or weren't all female at the time, but still a very dominant presence of women and female harmonies. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's anything and everything is really good.
Yeah.
And then you kind of grasp onto certain things, and you kind of go in phases too.
That was my next question. It sounds like at that point you found something you really like. So your diet was old time, and clearly that fluctuates. What are you into now? Is there anything, or are you just?
I'll still put on some old time rock out. It's still good. Doesn't get old. But as of right now, like the artists that I'm listening to quite a bit right now include, I really love Ty Segall. I think he's really incredible. I love what the Black Keys did and are
Mm-hmm.
still doing. They're still making some great music. I still love Courtney Barnett and Serotones, like I mentioned before. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of indie kind of progressive rock that I'm really gravitating towards right now, but I still love, Nina Simone. I still love Samantha Fish. Andrew Bird is kind of a classic favorite. I love the songwriting. I don't like the person necessarily of Ryan
Fair,
Adams.
yeah.
I don't think he's like the nicest person in the world necessarily. I think he's calmed down a bit as of late, but he writes some really incredible songs.
Yep.
So yeah, so I like to listen to a lot of things.
So it's just whatever strikes you at the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Are you headed somewhere with this? I mean, in terms of, do you just want to absorb as much music and create as much music as possible? Do you have a specific goal to be a superstar in mind? Do you want to play sold out arena gigs, or are you happy with just how it's going right now?
I mean, yeah.
That's the dumbest
Yeah.
question I've ever asked, I think.
Yes to all of it. I mean, sure. Who wouldn't want to be a superstar, right? Do I see that being very likely for me? Probably not. Do I love the music that I write and that I perform? Oh yeah, for sure. I'm excited. The Catcalls are starting to play, some like regional festivals, which is really exciting to see that take off. So that's a lot of fun to see that trajectory kind of developing.
And I love the sound of the Catcalls, by the way.
Thanks.
I saw a couple of videos, and that's one of those genres that turns me on.
Well, thank you.
love that kind of old hard old hard rock and roll sound.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a lot of fun, and I feel like, I've invested a lot of time and into, kind of the grind, and it feels like we're playing some pretty cool festivals this summer. And we haven't announced them yet, but they'll be announced very soon. And it's exciting to see kind of the fruits of your labor kind of finally coming up. I feel like, and we're certainly not anomalies in this, but with COVID, it felt like we were starting to get some really great momentum right as COVID hit, and it totally just like pulled the brakes on a lot of things for everyone.
You and everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody I've talked to on this podcast, same thing. Those COVID years, everybody just stopped, went inside, and either practiced or reinvented themselves.
Yeah. So I think that was hard. That was really hard on artists for sure. And it kind of, that and like Black Lives Matter and everything, it really made you question, why am I bothering making art? Who needs to hear my voice clouding up everything? And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm just saying I think a lot of people had that thought going on in their brains, and it really did stifle creativity. It's like, well, what are we doing this for? You know what I mean?
I mean, that's an interesting question. Why do we participate in this art, especially during, those COVID years? And I'm going to ask you that question. Why do you participate in the arts? If you want to get into COVID, fine.
Yeah. Well, for me, it is something that I love. And I don't think there's anything more powerful than like writing a song, being able to perform it and just lose yourself in that song. Because just like with painting, I'm sort of holed up in my house and I'm like in that flow state, in that zone. When I'm like in the zone playing a show and just like singing, screaming, belting my heart out, whatever, breaking strings on my guitar, not intentionally, of course. I don't believe in guitar abuse. But when I'm in that state, nothing in the world feels better than that. And especially when you pair that with that reciprocal energy from the crowd, that they are just loving it. And it's like, you're in this together. Nothing in the world feels better than that. And it feels like, yeah, I do have something important to say. And I think COVID really put that doubt in my mind of, do I really have anything to say? And well, it doesn't really feel safe to get people together right now, so we just won't. And, the Catcalls played a few outdoor shows during, like, we'll just call it the COVID years. But,
quote unquote. Yeah.
yeah, the ever ongoing. But, for me, it's such a powerful form of self-expression, and it just feels like the natural state of who I am and who I'm supposed to be, that I'm really drawn to it.
It's just part of who you are. That's what you're trying to say.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. You describe that connection when you're performing. Number one, you're in the zone and things are going so well and it feels good. But it's that when you feel the audience's energy hit you as well. I love that. I mean, it doesn't happen to me much. I'm not much of a performer anymore, but I recognize that. There's that, get past the fourth wall, get past the separation, and if you're all singing the same song and having the best time of your lives, there's nothing better. I'll be very honest with you.
Yeah. Well, and there's something about, like, when things are going so well that you're not thinking about things going well, you're just sharing this, like, experience with the audience. And it almost like it transcends that. It's you're like synced up with the audience, and it really does feel like magic.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. I want to ask you about your writing. You said you were dabbling as a writer, and you're a published writer. I'm interested in this too. What do you write? Tell me a little bit more about that.
I've always enjoyed writing. So I remember when I was a little kid, I must have been like 4 or 5 years old. I didn't know how to read yet, but I knew my letters, because you practice your alphabet with your family at home and everything. I remember making a booklet out of Post-it notes, and I would start spelling words. The long vowels I would do in capitalized letters, and short vowels I would do in lowercase letters. And I wrote a story about a baby duck or something, and I made it in my own little Post-it note. And I had this dream of I could run away from home and just be an author when I was like 4 or 5 years old. So,
you
I didn't know
are
how
an
to
artist.
Yeah.
Way down deep, you're an artist.
So that was my first experience with writing. But yeah, I've always enjoyed creative writing. And I was published back when I was teaching at Scales Mound. No, actually, I think when I was teaching in Dubuque, I got published by a flash fiction website just called Monkey Bicycle. And it was my first time being published for anything, but it was really small. It was just a 6-word story. So there's that folklore around the story of, like, for sale, baby shoes never worn.
Right. How short of, yeah.
Yeah. And people will claim, oh, Ernest Hemingway wrote this on a bet, but there's actually no proof to that. But anyhow, this Monkey Bicycle put out this, writing contest for writing a flash fiction piece. And I wrote something. Actually, I might have been student teaching. I don't really remember. And they published it. And I remember just being like, it's a pretty small website, but I remember feeling like, wow, someone actually cares about my writing. And I've always kept, in college, instead of a typical journal, I would write a poem every day for a few years. And I stopped writing when I realized I was writing the same poem over and over again after a while. But yeah, so I've always kind of kept my creative writing to be fairly private up until then. And then when I was teaching in Scales Mound, again, I got published by a website called 100 Word Stories. So it's flash fiction in exactly 100 words. And I'd been published in some, like, I think some smaller literary journals for, like, different schools or something. I don't really remember the details, but yeah, but I have a couple novels started that I haven't finished, that I started with NaNoWriMo. That's one of my projects I'd like to get back to and actually finish and publish. And I actually just participated in a collaborative art show where there was a a creative writer paired with a visual artist, and you created something. You could have one person create something first and then hand that off to the other person, or you could sort of simultaneously create something. And I wrote a poem called Catharsis, and it was very, very cathartic. And my visual artist partner created a really amazing piece to represent that too. So that was actually just in an art show at the Firehouse Art Gallery in Longmont, Colorado. They actually just finished that up a few weeks ago. But so writing has always been something really fun for me. And it's been a great way for me as a language arts and high school English teacher to connect with students in a way that, I don't know, it feels more meaningful. I can have fun and have kids have fun with Shakespeare, but there's something really unique about giving kids sort of this open canvas to do some creative writing. So I love sharing that with kids, but I always love doing that on my own. And over the years when, I'm back teaching full-time in the public schools, COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and I'm no exception to that. But also when I was doing, being a musician full-time, I did some music journalism for Boulder Beat and recently Femme Music. And I also just did some food journalism for Edible Denver magazine. So I still do a lot of writing in different capacities, but and some other journals that I've done some just freelance writing for.
But your creative writing, it sounds like that's kind of more for yourself as opposed to a more public audience.
A lot of it, but it was interesting with the Firehouse Art Gallery. It was a poem for me, but in the end, I also knew it was going to be shared publicly in an art gallery, and there's going to be an artist working pretty intimately with it to create a visual arts component of that. But it's this idea of, the whole premise of that was the idea of erasing myself and feeling like I have and continue to erase myself in different ways, and sort of reconciling with that in the poem.
That's an interesting concept, erasing yourself.
Yeah. And, that kind of came to me. There's a lot of different ways that we sort of erase parts of ourselves as we go through life. But I was recently teaching in a school district that it felt really vulnerable to be a teacher. And there's a lot of politics going on that seem to divide the public with education. And there's a lot of, sowing seeds of distrust of education, distrust of teachers, and in some cases targeting individuals within public education. And these are not new things. These are sort of coming to a head of things that have been happening for a long time. I remember being in Iowa, just finishing up my year at Dubuque Senior High School and marching on the Capitol in Madison, Wisconsin when Scott Walker was governor and basically made teachers unions illegal, banned teachers unions. And I remember thinking like, wow, this is setting a really dangerous precedent. And those things have continued. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. So I guess in sort of coping with the stress of that and what I was feeling directly where I was teaching this past year, this poem came out of how I tried to sort of erase myself and sort of just exist as this sort of anonymous teacher in this school district, out of fear that I would be targeted. Wow.
I mean, it's a powerful sentiment. My wife is also a public school teacher. So, in a very conservative district. So she faces a lot of the same, I don't know if problems is the right word, but a lot of the same concerns. Money's tight and the public doesn't understand what the teachers do, and fighting for qualified people to do to spread the work properly, not just, there's a million things going on.
Absolutely.
And, but again, that concept of erasing yourself. So it almost sounds like it came out of a numbing agent. You kind of want to numb yourself from, oh, it shouldn't be this hard kind of feeling. I don't know.
For sure.
That's what I'm getting out of it. But I think the fact that I'm thinking in those terms and feeling these things is a testament to your writing. And I haven't even read the thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that. I think that's what really brought that to my consciousness was sort of I wouldn't even say a defense mechanism. I would say that would be a survival mechanism for where I was. But it did bring up different memories of different times in my life when I felt like I had to erase parts of myself, or that I did that as sort of an instinctual thing, whether that's dealing with, the stress of something else in life, or, feeling a sense of depression or anything.
Right. So is your writing and or your music, are they kind of a release valve of sorts?
Yeah, I think I see writing as, I don't know, I think humans are innately creative.
I agree.
I think, there's this adage of like everyone's born an artist, right? And it's a matter of whether or not you listen to that and how you cultivate that. And for me, the arts is a release, because I think we all do have things to say and things to share. And I think it can manifest differently. I mean, just like you asked me before about my style, and, different instruments evoke different ideas and, stylistic representations of music for me. I think different mediums of creative work also helps release and manifest different types of things. And for me, like, for example, that poem that I shared, Catharsis, it was super cathartic, and it was almost a way for me to process things for myself. But it also felt like something really powerful to share with other people, because when you share the hard things with other people, that's why I love Sylvia Plath, because you can see yourself in their reflection, and you can feel like, wow, I'm not alone in this, because you felt this too. And I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely. And suddenly that goes back to that, trying to describe the connection between you and your audience. Even in that small scale, it's equally powerful as a large scale concert rocking out. Does that make sense?
It totally can make sense. Yeah. And every show is a little bit different. One of my friends, he's an amazing keys player in the Denver area. His name is Adam Bodine, and he's played a couple shows with me as a keys player. And I told him, I was like, I love that you just rock out to every show that I've ever seen you at. Cause I also saw him, hired for other bands, and regardless of what was going on stage, he was just rocking out and looked like he was having a blast. And he looked at me, he's like, yeah, I play every show. Like, it's like, it could be my last show, and I just want to have a blast doing it. And I was like, wow, like it's so easy to be like, oh, this is a small show, I'll just put in this kind of energy, or, oh, this is a really big deal show, I'm really going to try really hard for this one. And his philosophy is like, no, just give it all you've got for every single show, no matter where it is or who it's with. And I think that's hard to do, when we have these expectations as artists of, what is considered a really big show versus a not big show. But I think that's a great philosophy to move forward with.
Oh yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. And why wouldn't you, honestly? If you're going to get up there and bare your soul and communicate and pour your art out onto the floor, and why wouldn't you give it your all?
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, now I want to ask you about do my James Lipton end of the interview kind of questions. First question, what about your art turns you on?
I think any kind of true self-expression is really empowering. And, what I was saying before is like being able to get into that flow state, and especially when you're sharing that with an audience and it just feels like you're having this synchronous moment together. It's just the most powerful feeling in the world.
I will not argue that. Anything about your art turn you off?
I think it's easy to let yourself feel like you're getting blocked. One of the most powerful books that I've come across, or resources in general, is a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I know it's a staple with a lot of...
Yes, I know this book.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And even if you don't finish the 12 weeks, which I've started that book several times, I finished it once.
I've never I just filtered through it, but yeah.
But I mean, yeah, the whole nature of, writer's block or, some sort of creative block, I feel like that book has done so much to sort of break down misconceptions about creative blocks and how we are actually self-sabotaging ourselves. And I think that my biggest struggle is, by working with Julia Cameron's books, is recognizing how much I self-sabotage myself. And
really?
Oh yeah, we all do in some capacity, but when you realize what you're doing to yourself, you're like, okay, why am I doing this? I want to be successful. Why am I doing this? And it comes from a place of fear. And
that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, what I love about that book is she really digs deep. I mean, when you do the 12-week program, it is really powerful. I do recommend doing that with a book club so you have some sense of accountability. I actually did that as a virtual book club during COVID with, I started an organization years ago when I first moved to Boulder. I'm in Fort Collins now, but I started an organization called the Coalition of Women Songwriters because I just wanted to meet other women in the music scene. But yeah, I did a virtual book club with some of the folks from the Coalition of Women Songwriters, and actually working through the 12 weeks was really awesome.
Interesting.
And that's a book that I could do every year, and every year I would get something new and different out of it.
I sound surprised because about the self-sabotage, because you come across as such a confident, intelligent, there's a certain glow and power about you. I would never have suspected, maybe you just hide it very well. I don't know, but yeah, it seems surprising, but I think you're right that we all have our moments of sabotage, self-sabotage, but I think it's part of being a strong artist that you know what those are.
Yeah, for sure. And, recognizing that, just like anything, recognizing the behaviors to do that are very natural. And the true test is, can you recognize the behavior when it comes up and do something about it?
Right.
And I've been getting better about doing something about that. But not always, we're human.
No, but kudos to you, because I read a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you know about it. It's it's not really a religious book, but it has a lot of the same kind of notions in the sense that, I get into these behavioral patterns and teaches you to recognize them and get out of them, and everybody's got them. But yeah, I think whatever works.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I actually read part of that. One of my musician friends had a copy of that he'd let me borrow. So I started reading it. I never finished that one, but
it's a bit thick and wordy, but if you can get through it, it's a lot of the same kind of stuff. It at least sounds like it. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
What other art form that you haven't tried that you think you would like to?
Hmm. Well, I've kind of dabbled in a lot of things. Um, I mean, I'm always down to try, different types of art and creativity. I don't know. I feel like I've done so much.
Anything you've like just seen and say, "Oh, that might be cool someday."
I mean, I think aerial dance looks really cool, but I'm like, I don't know if I have the coordination for that. I have some
Aerial,
friends.
like the aerial rings and silks and
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if I have the coordination for that, but it looks really fun. I don't see myself getting super deep into that, but I just think what those dancers do is absolutely incredible. And I was actually really fortunate to collaborate with a local aerial dance group for the Catcalls show at the Aggie Theater. Again, right before COVID. And it was so cool to see. I love doing sort of interdisciplinary arts projects. And so I think actually the thing that I would like to do is like legit write like a musical or like a rock opera. I started doing that for like Boulder Arts Week. I did like a shorter piece where we kind of worked some things together and I had an interpretive dancer, but I'd love to actually do like a rock opera. I think that would be super cool.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think
Would
that'd be
love
fun.
to see that.
And of course, like finishing
that.
all the half projects that I have. Like I said, I have like 2 or 3 novels that are like pretty well started. One of them's like half done. I have half of an orchestral arrangement done that is one of my original folk songs for like a middle school orchestra and all kinds of things.
I think that's just one of the hallmarks of being an artist is that somewhere you've got a pile of projects that aren't finished.
Yeah. Well, what's hilarious is my mother is very creative, but in very different ways. So her house is filled with like a ton of like half crocheted and, knitted scarves and blankets and all kinds. Like she's like a craftswoman.
Right.
I remember growing up and her like sewing things and stuff like that. But it, all of her sewing and, stuff like that stuff, she's got just boxes and boxes of stuff and yarn and this and that, collecting this. And she's got all kinds of like kitchen gadgets and stuff like this. And I remember growing up and being like, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. But here I am. And it just looks different because instead of being like a crazy kitchen gadget person or a crazy like knitter, crocheter, whatever she does, like instead of all of that stuff, and she has a flower shop too, I've got all kinds of musical instruments and all kinds of paints and canvases and stuff. So
yeah, you can see behind me my collection of trash from unfinished puppet projects and all sorts of, I got a box of stuff. Yeah, I think that's funny. But I think that's a definite hallmark of being a true artist is that some of the ideas just never make it to fruition.
Yeah. But there's always something to do.
Right. Right. We shouldn't be bored. We shouldn't have that writer's block. Go finish the other thing. Anyway, is there an art form that you think that you would never want to try?
I don't think so. I would pretty much try any art form at least once. And
even
find
the aerial
something.
Dancing.
Yeah, I would try it. With proper training. So I wouldn't hurt myself.
Granted.
Yeah.
But you're up for anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Don't take that out of context, but
No. Art nerd. We'll stick to that. However, I suddenly want to see you on the silks come down with your guitar and start a show. So.
Oh my God. That sounds dangerous with a guitar.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe not the guitar, but
come down and the guitar's on the ground and I land on it and pick it up. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll consider that.
Okay. That's me as a director talking. So this is
that could be the beginning of the rock opera.
Oh, totally.
Oh, we've just created something.
Just let me know when you want to keep working on it. I'm fine with it. Last question. Where can we see and or hear some of your artwork?
Yeah. So Again, my name is Riley Ann, A-N-N. So my website is rileyannsound.com. And you can also check out the Catcalls at thecatcallsband.com. And both Riley Ann, musician, artist, writer, the Catcalls, and Back to the Mountain all have Facebook pages and Instagram pages that you can like and follow if you so desire. And hopefully I'll have some more projects finishing at some point that you can find, hopefully in the future, some novels and orchestra pieces and all kinds of stuff, and maybe a rock opera.
Maybe a rock opera. That excites me to no end. What about the project you had talked about earlier about where the musician handed it off to the writer, handed it off to the visual? You said that's online? Those are still online, that we can see those?
Yeah, that's called the Make More Everything Challenge. And I can send you the link because I don't know that off the top of my head. But that was the first one in 2020 was put together by Maxwell Tretter. And the second one, he did that in conjunction with, I believe, it was, I don't know if it was directly with the Horsetooth International Film Festival or it was a local organization that deals with filmmaking in Fort Collins, but that was at the Lyric, which is a local independent movie theater that we have here in Fort Collins. So I can send you the links for that. Yeah,
please do, because your work is in there as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Riley Ann, I can't thank you enough for putting up with me this morning and having this conversation. It's really, you're an amazing artist.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I'm happy to know you, and thank you again for a fantastic conversation. Thought-provoking, which is what I love.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm really honored to be a guest, and it was great to have this conversation with you too, and likewise to everything.
Yeah. And maybe we can put our names on a rock opera someday in the future.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay.
Thanks for hanging around and geeking out with us. If you enjoyed the show, hit the like and subscribe buttons. And more importantly, join the conversation and leave us a message or comment. We'd love to hear about your nerdy art. Thanks again, and join us next week for more Art Nerds.